Bold leaders, no buzzwords, no BS. This is Mastering Workplace Culture, real talk on crafting workplace cultures that deliver results. Each episode, we go beyond corporate speak and talk with leaders who've actually done it. Those who've faced breakdowns, made bold moves, and built organizations where respect and results carry equal weight. If you're ready to challenge assumptions, gain actionable inspiration from proven mentors, and build a workplace culture that actually works, this podcast is for you.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Mastering Workplace Culture. I'm Mark Babbitt, one of your co-hosts. Chris Edmonds is the other co-host. Say hi, Chris.
Hey there.
And we're joined today by an intriguing guest that actually came to us from a previous guest, Julia Gabor. Thank you to Julia for introducing us to Jennifer Edic Bryant. Calling on over 30 years of experience in K-12 education, Jennifer is a passionate builder of human capacity for improvement and growth within education systems. Through facilitation, coaching, and shared learning, she supports leaders in creating growth-minded cultures and practices while aligning systems to better serve students and their communities. Jennifer received her Bachelor of Arts and Master's of Education degree from UCLA and her doctorate from USA Rossier School of Education. Dr. Jennifer, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to join the two of you today. I'm excited for this. Please call me Jen or Jennifer. Don't have to do doctor. But, I put that out there because it was a lot of work. So
It was a lot of work. Well, and it is fascinating having grown up in Southern California. There's a lot of folks, especially in education, that did maybe undergrad at USC and then post-grad at UCLA, vice versa. You did kind of one of those things there. Two very well-regarded schools.
Thank you. I'm a brogen, I say. That's my moniker, I guess.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, two outstanding friends. Thanks.
Well, I'm going to start with our first question with your background in, and clearly, Jen, your passion for education. It's amazingly admirable, and our educational organizations and teachers and kids need all the help they can get.
Yeah.
So tell us, how did you move from being an educator and director to focusing upon culture within education?
Yeah. So my story goes back to just always being very interested and observant of leadership and how things get done. And I actually was the student school board member for my school district where I was in high school. And so I sat up on the dais, and this was quite a while ago. I'll date myself because one day, one of the employees told me that I could politely ask the board member next to me to not blow smoke in my face because she smoked on the dais. So that gives you my age.
That's back there.
Yeah. I had this opportunity to start observing what leadership did to impact just organizations. And it interested me. Went into teaching after UCLA undergrad, worked in a Department of Education job through my undergrad years. So again, exposed to education, went into teaching and was able to get this broad base of experiences, so many different things. I helped develop curriculum and quality instruction, and I was a leader in my instructional and teacher teams, but I also served as a union negotiator. And so I experienced learning about the system and leadership and how the culture is impacted by the relationships. And so really became an expert in something called interest-based bargaining. I can talk more about that because I continue to do that work now. But then as I moved into administration, I became more and more responsible, more and more in a formal leadership position. And I realized that whatever we were doing, and in education, there was so much we have to do, and it's so important because our work is to develop lives, humans, and to impact them. And it's a heavy weight, and it's an important one that we have to remind ourselves of every single day. But as we're doing that, how are we creating an organization that can best do that work, and keeping your teachers and your classified staff all on the same page is really important. And you're improving how you're teaching, and you're improving how you're doing things in your plant. And so again, continued to be very interested in this. And throughout my career, I have to say, amazing mentors, very strong leaders with a focus on building positive culture and using that to drive improvements and change, and ultimately better outcomes for our kids, families, and communities. So as I went back to get my doctorate, I focused on instructional leadership and building great instructional opportunities and teacher education. But then I did my dissertation on leadership, because I realized you have to have that strong leader, that emotionally intelligent leader who can create an environment that all of these great changes, all these great things can happen. So that's how I came to this work. As a district administrator, I had to use that knowledge, that experience to do that work, bridge the theory, the practice, the ideas to the practice, I should say, because that's another big gap. How do we take the ideas, the research, and bridge it to then what does it look like on the ground? And of course, culture makes a big difference. So I did that work, and now I consult and do that work across the state of California and across the nation, and do some international work as well. So that's my journey. And to kind of pinpoint and just like focus in on your question, I realized that the culture, the leadership that leads these things in all of these organizations, that is one of the key drivers of how well your organization can achieve and grow and impact and meet their outcomes. All right, big, long story.
Yeah, loved it. Love it. What a journey. Jennifer, you within education, then, what do you see as the primary challenges facing school districts, boards, and academic leadership today? And as a coach of high school football and baseball for years, I would answer the parents. But my guess is you have a different answer to that.
Well, yes and no. So a while ago, when I told you I worked at UCLA, I worked for a prominent education psychometrician. So he was a mathematician that studied and helped design assessments, but he was a very big name. And I was his secretary. And so I was exposed to these things, all of these complexities. But one of the things he always said was that this is a very complex business. It's not simple. And if we try to simplify it, we're not going to do well. And so my answer to that question is that it is complex. Yes, it's the relationships we build with the parents. That's part of the culture of our organization. They are one of our primary, partners in this. As are the students, as are community organizations. But when I look at leaders in the field, in the profession, I think there are two things that kind of stand out, and the research supports this as well as just my observation. First of all, the pipeline to build effective leaders for school leaders and then for district leaders is very weak right now. Across the nation, we're having a hard time finding people to fill that pipeline. So you speed up processes, you go through a credentialing program, and there's so much to learn, so many things to learn. Imagine the state legislation, the instructional practices, the content areas that you as a leader kind of have to have a toe in to kind of help support your instruction. Just the plant management of how to manage things. And then, of course, with each state, things are constantly changing. California in my 30 years has had so many legislative changes that you have to know, understand, and address. And then that emerging leader needs to grow as a leader, an emotional, intelligent leader who can build a culture that can address all of these things. So people, first of all, are reluctant to jump into it because it's so much work. And we don't always do a really good job helping people be prepared. So sometimes it's a sink or swim. And, you do a 1 or 2 year part-time prep program, and you're just not going to be able to cover it all. And I believe that sometimes what gets lost is that emotionally intelligent leadership, that high quality ability to build a culture that can do all the other things that we need to do, because it's one of, all of these things. So that intentional explicit effort is one thing that is a challenge. There are promising practices out there though. So secondly, once people get into the job, as I said, it is so overwhelming. The learning curve is huge. I worked with principals in my previous job, and they worked so hard. And it was so hard for them to, for example, understand the broader system at the district and then the state level, not because they couldn't, not because they were digging their heels in and saying, I don't want to learn it. They just had so much going on. The day-to-day of a kid falls down and needs stitches and parents are coming. I mean, their day-to-day ability just is so limited. So how do we support them? The challenge is, how do we help them grow in their ability to be strong leaders so that they can build that culture that is needed? The most successful schools I see have leaders who build powerful, positive cultures, collaborative, and one that address all stakeholders in their community. So those are, I think, two of the biggest challenges directly related to building administrators in my business.
Yeah, and I will admit that I did student teaching in LA Unified way back when. That would be early 80s. And then because of the nature of being a substitute teacher, you never know what you're going to get into in a classroom. The teacher might have done a great job in prepping, the students for the sub, and some students who had more fun giving me a bad time than they did, learning. But then the culture of the school has such a huge influence on the classroom environment. I was fascinated by it, but I need some consistency. And so a very good friend of mine, I was a volleyball coach way back when, and our head coach got a job at the local Catholic girls' school. And he said, they're looking for a math teacher. And I said, well, I can do that. It was the coolest 3 years because of, you talk about culture and you talk about discipline and the fact that I was still a very much beginner teacher. Yeah. I had all these support, all these, not only nuns who were very, very helpful, but then there's the, not formal nun teachers and 3 boys. We were truly boys, the only men teachers in the environment. But the support was phenomenal, and I learned a great, great deal. And yet then I went on to work with some other schools, and I missed that connection and the consistency and the voice that said, we're going to do it this way, and we may learn a bunch. Yeah. So, and then I went out into the nonprofit world, and I went into the corporate world, and it's the same thing. There's not enough really savvy leaders about, if you build a culture that's validating and respectful, it serves everybody really, really well. But I don't think that this is Mark's and my kind of purpose in life is to help leaders understand that. So one of the things, and Mark was a teacher and coach in public education as well. And what I remember seeing is kind of some of the legacy issues in our education system, from old school thinking, old school administrators with younger thinking teachers, right? Teachers unions and kind of the classic union management issue, budget constraints. They're worse probably today than they've been in a couple decades. But how do those issues impact the administrators, principals, leaders that you work with today when trying to help them understand the power of a positive culture?
Yeah. Really good. First of all, good for you, subbing. Oh my word. What? I never did subbing. And I probably said early on, I would never do subbing. Because you're right. You're jumping into a culture, even in a classroom, that you had zero ability to weigh into, and you really don't know what you're getting. And kids are kids. And listen, it's my belief, all kids are fabulous. Even the ones that are a little bit naughty, or even the ones that are a lot naughty. Deep inside, there's value in every single child. And,
absolutely.
And so, but some of them love to try you. And so good for you to sub. And it's nice to know that you've had that teaching and coaching experience. And I think you're right. You said something that made me think about how this isn't just this leadership development and the culture building isn't just within K-12 public education, private education. It is. I've been doing some work with some nonprofits as well. And this is what it takes to have a healthy organization for your employees, and then ultimately for your clients, right? And if you're a for-profit, then that just increases your profits, because that's part of what your outcome is, right? You mentioned some legacy things, old school administrators. I think what we're seeing is those are slowly going away. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, school administrators were plant managers. Teachers were able to be the experts. And we can argue whether we bemoan the loss of teacher autonomy or think it's great because, whatever. But the plant manager role just kind of has disappeared. And they are expected to have so many hats, tremendous amount of leadership in, as I said, you still have to manage the plant. Instructional practices, high level, instruction, content areas, also the legislative running and developing reports and plans and things that are required to keep your money flowing, and then dealing with PR and community members and parents, and then, of course, building a culture where all that can be really, really powerful. So the job has changed a lot. It's very overwhelming. Do you know that upwards of, I think of the numbers, I'm trying to go back to some research I did, upwards of like 40% of teachers get their administrative credential. But
that's huge.
The vast majority of them never take a job, an administrative job.
Because having that advanced degree bumps them up in the pay scale.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. But they might be brilliant administrators.
They might be, but they look at that job and they learn about it in their admin program. And they're like,
see what those supervisors are going through now.
Yeah. Say that again, Mark. You said which?
They see what their administrators, their supervisors are going through right now and go, I don't want anything to do with that.
Exactly. So, that's part of what's contributing to this weak pipeline of administrators, and how we are intentionally encouraging teachers to move into the role. And this is what I did my dissertation research on. Like, a lot of times, and this happened to me, my administrators would say, "Oh, you're such a great teacher. You should think about going to administration." And that was the encouragement.
Right.
But what I found were there were promising practices with leaders who were more explicitly tapping teachers, giving them opportunities walking alongside them. And these opportunities weren't, hey, I'm going to be out today. Can you cover discipline? It was, I'm going to sub you out. I want you to cover discipline, but I'm going to sit and observe and provide you really structured feedback. And I'm going to give you these opportunities. And when those teachers did move into administrative work, they felt a lot more prepared. They were much more successful at coming in, not feeling like they're drinking out of the fire hose quite as much. And that gives them time to really think more about, okay, how do I intentionally build this culture? How do I build, this place so that all of these other things work well? And we know that takes time. You can't just say, I'm going to make it a good culture. And I do it by being nice to people. I found you have to explicitly do things to do that, starting with relationship building, right? And that takes effort and time. And so anyway, these teachers that get this very intense kind of mentoring really have become great administrators. That's kind of some research that I found. You mentioned unions. And it's funny, I told you I was a union chief negotiator. I today in my consulting work do training and help facilitate labor negotiations, and I use a process called interest-based bargaining. Interest-based bargaining and interest-based problem solving comes from the Harvard Negotiation Project. It was built not for education, but for international relationships. And the sole premise is that if we can hear each other's stories, identify common interests, not what we want, but why we want them, and then address all these different possibilities that would meet those interests, we can come up with solutions to problems and agreements where everybody wins. And Getting to Yes is the book by, the original researchers from Harvard. Highly recommend it. But that IBB process is something that I use. And so your union relationship can either contribute positively to the culture, or it can be so detrimental because you create a us versus them. Everybody's out to get me. And so you need things like interest-based problem solving, interest-based bargaining to shift that. Let me tell you a quick story. I told you I had these lifetime mentors. One of them was my superintendent, who I'd known since I sat on that dais as a 17-year-old.
Oh, fun.
She went on to hire me as a teacher, work with her. I still work with her today. But she inherited the superintendency. And the previous superintendent tossed her the keys and said, "Good luck, honey," which...
Classic.
Right? Like, great. So she moves into this very divisive, this culture where people were just against each other. Our classified staff, which, it's your custodial and your secretaries, very vital people for a district. And then your teachers, they weren't talking to each other. People were storming out of negotiations. And she was like, there's got to be a better way. And so she talked with the leaders of the two unions and said, do you think we could find a better way? This is just all of your attention and energy is on this conflict versus the students, which should be our primary focus. So she brought in the interest-based bargaining and interest-based problem solving. Every single employee was trained on this process.
Wow.
It was used at the bargaining tables. Get rid of the lawyers. We still want lawyers to look over the document, but we sit down together and we go through a process where we hear each other. We understand the underlying interests. Together we come up with solutions. Better than that, and this was what transformed the culture. And this is again, one of my aha moments in my career. Every single employee understood how interest-based problem solving worked. Same process. So if there's a conflict, Chris, you and Mark get into a little tiff and you come to me and I'm your administrator, I'm like, okay, let's sit down. Let's tell the story. Okay, let's identify. Let's make sure we both understand what the problem is we're trying to address. Okay, let's understand the interest. And you walk through the process and resolve the conflict. Literally transform the culture of this district. And it sailed, went on to impact the community so much that the community became an all-American city.
Wow.
Based on collaboration with the school district. It was a beautiful place to work because we all could do what we needed to do, negotiate our contracts, do the things we need to do, but create a culture where we knew we were going to come together, solve problems, and most importantly, keep our focus on our kids.
Yeah.
And that was a great way that culture and those things can positively impact culture.
Jennifer, you in part, I imagine, because of all these legacy and even non-legacy issues, burnout remains a huge issue for way too many educators in way too many school districts and states today.
Mm-hmm.
Throw in the whole separation of church and state issue that many states are going through right now. Mm-hmm. It makes it even worse for some.
Yeah.
How does a proactive conversation like the one we're having today about culture, inclusive, representative discussions specifically about culture impact the burnout rate we're seeing in education?
Yeah. I think building a culture, a positive culture, and I think burnout can help be a little alleviated. You're never going to get rid of it in our business. It's just the way it is. It's a lot. It's a hard job, no matter where you are in it. But here's the thing, what you said, just thinking about it and naming it is really important. And that can be built into the culture. A leader who acknowledges that sometimes people are griping about something or because of a different reason, and maybe it's more of a burnout reason. And so as leaders, we want to develop a culture where, first of all, our employees can acknowledge and be believed. You know, when somebody brings us and says, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm feeling, we have to listen and we have to acknowledge that that's their experience, even if it's not one that we see. And that's that's something across the board, burnout and everything. You know, when people say things, believe them. And then let's get into figuring out the deeper levels of understanding why and addressing those issues. So understanding the story and believing the story, but the leader also has to be, and I bring this word, this emotionally intelligent leadership, you have to also be able to be self-aware. You have to work on your own self-awareness. And so that's a challenge. And another area that I begin coaching leaders on is let's start with your own self-awareness. What are you doing to acknowledge your own burnout or anything else related to how you're thinking and how that then impacts? And then how can you take tangible steps for you as a leader to deal with your own burnout? And then to allow time and space for your teachers to acknowledge theirs and to support them in taking steps to address that. So I had a really good friend I worked with when I was a district administrator, and she and I would work from 7:30 till 7:30, 8 o'clock, and the work never ended. The work never ended. And we finally had to talk about it. And we started within, and collaboration is another big piece of the work I do. We said, wait a minute, we cannot maintain this. We're going to burn out. We're going to just fall apart. So we named it. We addressed it. We griped a little bit because sometimes that's what you got to do. And then you move on, right? You got to, and leaders got to let people do that and then facilitate movement towards something, right? But we just came up with this simple idea that, at the end of the day, if it was 6:30, 7 o'clock, we're going to go in. We said, we're going to make a commitment. We're going to go into each other's office and say, okay, it'll all be here tomorrow. And barring some horrible situation, and we consistently held each other accountable for our keeping ourselves from burning out. And leaders can help employees build that, and they can build that within the culture of their organization. So that's kind of how I see good leaders addressing that burnout for sure.
All of that makes so much sense. I will share with you, she's probably going to kill me if she ever hears this podcast, but my oldest niece is a teacher, has been for 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
And she loves literally everything about it. From a relationship building with the kids, that's her strong suit.
Mm-hmm.
To having candid conversations with parents, positive and sometimes not so positive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she has so many strengths, so emotionally intelligent, and yet even she had one child last year that zero discipline, zero structure, zero accountability from the parents, bullying, disrupting, and the parents wouldn't do anything about it, and the administrators wouldn't do anything about it. It was all as if they thought she was making up stuff.
Yeah.
Which, back to your point, if somebody gripes, you got to take a moment and believe them.
Mm-hmm.
And so for somebody absolutely dedicated to the craft and the profession, it burned her out terribly. It, like, every day was like, oh my God, I'm going back into the same classroom with the same dynamics. Nothing has changed. And now I know nothing is going to change. I can't do this anymore. Now, her credit, she rallied and she's teaching again. She's getting her classroom set up again for this year.
Yeah.
But wow, if you could take somebody as dedicated to the profession as she is and burn them out over one trigger, and the trigger wasn't necessarily the child, it was the parent's inability or unwillingness to do anything about it, and the administrator's failure to back her up.
Yeah.
That was it for her. She was almost done after 11 years. So everything you're saying makes so much sense right now.
Yeah. I'm so sorry that she experienced that. And I say this with a extreme empathy for her particular situation. Is that's not an unusual story. I remember having those years where I was like, so again, it goes back to how are those leaders setting up a culture where she could have been heard and believed. And even if we can't control, this is, it's not a factory. We can't move the widgets out that are faulty, the parents or the students. We can't change that. But if she was supported and found a way, even just to be heard, might have helped her more get through that year feeling less of that extreme tension and stress, right? It's a lot of stress. So that's where it goes back to building leaders who can facilitate those conversations. Sometimes school leaders, they're afraid. They don't know how, or these parents are so intense and they're just on defense mode themselves. How do we, again, get them to be self-aware? Okay. And how do I realize I'm being defensive because this is pretty intense, but as a leader, I need to push forward, support my teacher. And how do I do that as well as maintaining my own sense of, calm? And we can teach those things, how to create these conversations with difficult conversations. It sounds like your niece, right? You said has some real strong relationship building skills, and people that have those can learn very quickly some of the moves of handling these difficult conversations. But it's a hard situation. And it's not one that is rare, unfortunately.
No, and what I'm struck by, and Mark and I talk about this with senior leaders we work with all the time, is that leadership isn't just about managing output or managing to test scores, or look at whatever the main metrics are that can drive leaders crazy, because you can get focused on that and ignore the human resource that is feeling not heard, not paid attention to, not believed. And so it puts a great deal of pressure upon leaders. And I don't think it's much different today than it was 40 years ago, but that the best administrators, the best superintendents are as focused upon the human experience every day as they are about the students learning and feeling good about the progress that they're making. And it's very, very, very rare. And I know we're talking about education primarily, but it's rare in industry, in every industry, in for-profit, nonprofit, startups.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
My husband does similar leadership development, organizational growth work in the for-profit sector. And we face the exact same things. We share ideas. It's great. We don't compete and, we get the benefit of each other. So it's pervasive. Yeah. It's really interesting. So much of the outcomes depend on the culture that you're building. And oftentimes people forget that. They think if I take time, especially busy administrators, if I take time to do this, I won't have time for this. And it really is. Time is finite. I get that. But what they don't see is building these relationships. Taking the time now is actually going to save you time later and increase your outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and what's so interesting is that education particularly has these multiple groups that all have important and valid needs, needs and wants of administrators, teachers, parents, students that you've talked about. And maybe, and Mark and I have just learned about interspace negotiations, and now we're fascinated at it. Is that the single best avenue you have found using the interspace problem solving and negotiation process to help get all these groups working cooperatively?
Yeah.
God forbid.
Chris, I love it. I'm ready to write a new research paper on this because I think it is part of it. I think building relationships, collaborating, these are the key things I work on with organizations. How do we do this collaboratively? And how do we build authentic collaboration, not pseudo collaboration? Rewind back to the good old Tuckman's stages of team development. Do you guys know the good old Tuckman? Forming, storming, norming, performing, right? We got to go back and be intentional about, that everybody's nice to each other doesn't mean it's a healthy culture. It means deep inside you're possibly, just not addressing things. So working through authentic collaboration where you move into that deep collaboration where you can manage conflict, working with, and that of course takes positive relationships. And this is all principles of interest-based bargaining. Positive relationships and cycles of continuous improvement is another thing I bring into my work. So it is IBB. It is solving problems together, hearing everybody's story, working together, hearing and believing everybody's story, working together on possible solutions, trying them out, seeing how they work. It's okay if things don't work perfectly. Everything should be a cycle of continuous improvement. Going back together and saying, okay, this worked, this didn't, and this takes some data collection. Data doesn't have to be this big, crazy psychometrician metric. It can be what we call street data.
Yep, anecdotal.
Grab a couple of qualitative feedback, and then just together figuring out who you are, where you're going, and how you're going to get there, right? And then just going through that cycle till you get there with all stakeholders. So interest-based bargaining is a core component of the work I do. I don't even call it that, but I do a lot of the strategies within my improvement work. And the improvement work is more about working in collaboration, building positive relationships and culture, empowering leaders to do this, and then empowering the organization to become a collaborative, continuous improvement organization. And then I want to work myself out of a job because I want I want them to have the capacity to just continue this no matter what they're addressing.
Well, and there's lots of other school districts that need you. So if
Yeah.
you don't have to keep working with this one, you can work to get the others up to that level of self-directedness.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my hope and dream. Impact as many kids ultimately as possible. But I do that through working with the organization, and that's kind of my, what do we call it? The fourth quarter of my career.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Jennifer, we warned you this question was coming, and it's based on my personal experience with education systems over the years. I'm a father of 5, grandfather of 6, young children now, one of whom is special needs. And I also gained a certain perspective as a mostly off-campus coach for many seasons. But based on that experience, the one issue that bugs me most about education cultures today is that it seems as though we never ask the students what they want, what inspires them, what works for them, and what does not work for them.
Yeah.
With all that in mind, what do kids want from education today, and how do leaders incorporate their preferences when intentionally creating productive cultures?
Yeah. Great question, Mark. I love it. First of all, kids want, and then I say this because I've done focus groups with students in my district. I've listened to them. They want to be heard. They just want someone to listen. And again, listen and believe them when they say this is what they're experiencing. They want to be supported when they struggle. When they face struggles, they want help, and they get discouraged when, whether it's a teacher or administrator, just says, well, whatever. Okay. Well, you just need to try harder, and even if they're that little, kind of naggy student, or the one that kind of gets under your skin, that's still what they want. They want help. That's their way of asking for it. They want to succeed. They do want to achieve, and they want to feel understood. And good leaders need to build that into their system, into the culture. The great news for you, Mark, is at least in California, it is required by law that we listen to our students. California's funding formula and the development of what's called an LCAP, and let me just say it's like a organizational strategic plan, requires that districts engage their students in the process of developing goals, metrics, and budgets. In particular, how they're going to do that to address high need students. Who high need students are those students that have additional needs. Maybe they do have an IEP. Maybe they are learning English as another language. Maybe they come from a family that lives in poverty, or they've been in the foster system. We know it takes more funding to address those needs. And so it's this idea of equity, not equal, but equity, so that every kid can achieve. But it is written into the law that we listen to students. Federal law, our schools that write school plans have to engage students. Now, what happens is, remember the ideals, research, legislation, bridging to practice. How do we help schools and districts do this with commitment over the idea of compliance? I shouldn't just be checking the box. I need to be committed to this and build a system that, whether it's required by the legislation or not, it exists. Another bit of good news is there's something in California called the Community Engagement Initiative. It comes from state legislation. Districts, this is one of my clients, we work across the state, bringing districts all across California, big and small, together. They've built teams to work on improving the partnerships between parents and families, students, community organizations, school leaders, and district leaders. And you have to have a team, you have to have those people on that team when you come. So we bring our students in. If you want to feel hopeful, Mark, I'm going to encourage you to go to the Community Engagement Initiative, CEI's website. They have a website called California Engage. And there's some videos, and just this last spring, we have videos of some of our student participants. It is amazing to hear them talk, and it will bring you hope.
I will definitely take you up on that. And it just occurred to me, Chris, that Posey listens to the podcast on their morning commute with her mother. And so, Posey, yes, I was talking about you, and I regret it.
Yeah. I think one of the most exciting things I do is help bring people together to solve problems in their education system. And when we talk about students, I think absolutely we need to hear and and I'm just not talking high school kids. I'm talking, we have fifth graders that come to this community engagement initiative, and in front of 1,500 people will stand up, and because we build capacity in them to be leaders and to be heard, they'll grab the mic and share their insights on whatever improvement plan the team, and literally, I just sit there going,
blown away.
Oh,
yeah. I will tell you, since I already mentioned Posey, she just turned 11. She's going into 6th grade. She has Down syndrome, and she is not bashful at all about what she likes about school and what she does not. So
excellent.
Yeah,
that's the Babbitt blood there too, Mark.
If she's in the California system and a public system, then you get her connected with whatever committees, because as I said, it's required at the school level and then also at the district level in developing the LCAP. They have to have a plan, and it has to be documented. Now, again, the different leaders develop it. They sometimes it's a compliance. Let me just, I did a survey, that's it. But I used to bring students in 3 times a year for a full day and work with them to develop our goals, metrics, and budgets. So
awesome. Well, we have learned a great deal, and I know our listeners have as well. And we promised you, Jen, that we would give you the opportunity to kind of share a bit with how do you recharge when you're not at work? What's the cool stuff that you do that kind of allows you to be so present for this important work?
Yeah. The joy of, after 31 years in a district office job, that's where I ended. I didn't start there, obviously, but is having my own consulting firm then allows me the flexibility to do things like this. And, I have, as I said, a great partner in life, my husband. And so we geek out and talk about work because we love what we do, love every day. I've always loved, from the day I started in a classroom, I've loved the work I do. But we love to do things now, like if we have remote things, be other places. We like to travel. We ride bikes. We cycle. I'm newer to it, so I'm reminded it's not called riding bikes. It's called biking or cycling. Don't say I ride bikes. And between the two of us, we have 5 amazing children. So we visit them. We watch their pets. And just enjoy doing things, going different places and just living the best life we can each and every day, and helping people be the very best and organizations be the very best that they can be. And that's what drives us. I think, I could say I knit and I read, and I do all those things too. And those things are helpful. And I will say this, because this is great advice for leaders as well as in the personal life. I have an amazing group of mentors, and I have an amazing core group of peers from my doctoral program, 3 other women who we meet, and we just work and talk and collaborate personally and professionally. And it just enriches our lives. And so I love to commit time to that, because it helps others and it really empowers me as well.
Well, good for you, Jennifer. Listen, we can't tell you how much we appreciate you coming on board. We're so thrilled that Julia Gabor introduced us.
I know. Julia's
we admire your work. Chris and I had never even discussed culture in the education sector before until we met you. So this has been eye-opening for us too. And we're sure it's been that for our listeners also. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so glad that we could talk. So glad I could share this kind of perspective in education, and just appreciate you tremendously for having me on. And I too hope that your listeners really find some value in it. So thanks.
Guaranteed. Well, and to those listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode. And please look both forward and back. We have some great episodes already in the can. You can find them on just about every outlet that handles podcasts, also on our YouTube channel. And we have many more guests like Dr. Jennifer who will inspire you to take action and to help you intentionally create your culture. So be sure to listen in. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Bye for now.
This has been Mastering Workplace Culture. No jargon, no corporate fairy tales, just leaders who show their scars and celebrate their wins. Do something with what you heard today. Subscribe, share, take action. Creating a culture that equally values respect and results is your responsibility. Go own it. When you're ready to make that happen, we're here to help. We'll catch you in the next episode of Mastering Workplace Culture.